Imagine you're 30 years old. You have a job offer for $70,000. But instead of just saying, I'm going to take the job, you've read my book, you read the chapter on negotiation, or even a different book on negotiation, said, before I take this job, I'm going to negotiate, and I'm going to negotiate for $1,000 more. Getting just $1,000 more, that's not a massive negotiation. You don't have to be the world's best negotiator. You just have to know some basic techniques. So now you just got $1,000 more. If you do nothing else in your life, if you sit in this job the next 35 years till you retire, you've just made $35,000. One 5-minute negotiation, $35,000. But of course, you're not going to sit in this job for the next 30, 35 years. You're going to have other jobs, get promotions, get raises, and you're probably going to learn how to negotiate for more than just $1,000. If you learn to negotiate, whether it's my book or any one of the other great negotiation books out there, you can earn tens of thousands of dollars more, even hundreds of thousands of dollars more over your career. Isn't that worth investing in reading a book, in investing a few hours and taking an online class? The returns are huge. And now here's the other secret. I use negotiation as an example because we can all do the math and say, oh, I get $1,000 more, another 30, 35 years. Here's the math. The same thing is true if you get better at being a leader, at communicating, at team building, at improving your network.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we are joined by the author of the Career Toolkit, Mark Herschberg. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're happy to have this conversation today. And before we get into the depth of the conversation, we're going to be talking about career planning. But who is Mark Herschberg?
So many things. I am a son and a fantastic uncle, if I do say so myself, and I have 2 nephews who would validate that. I'm also a CTO, typically helping startup companies or Fortune 500's place startup. I'm an instructor at MIT, an author, a professional speaker. I'm very active with a number of nonprofits. I serve on a couple boards, so I do a lot of different things.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, I know sometimes we ask that question. It's a 10-second answer. Other times it's a 10-minute answer, and it really just depends on where you want to go with it.
We can take 10 minutes, but I'll let you direct the conversation. Some listeners might get bored after 2 or 3 of that.
No, I would say that would be hard to think because you do have a pretty interesting background. There's a lot that you've done in a lot of different areas that you've touched on. So it's really cool to talk to somebody with your diversity of experiences. But
looking forward to it.
But again, the thing that we want to focus on today is the whole element of career planning. And I guess the first thing we'll start with is, why do people need a career plan? Why is that important?
Imagine if at work, your boss said, we have this really big project. We're going to spend the next year on it. But hey, you know what? Let's not bother with a project plan. Let's not bother with a budget. We got a year to do this. Let's just wing it. And hopefully, if all goes well, maybe it will wind up working. Right? Everyone would say, no, that's insane. Of course you need a plan. Now, no one expects that plan to work exactly as you put on paper. We all know things will change, things will come up. You're going to probably fall behind, and that's okay. But by having the plan, you recognize, are you making progress? Do you need to change things up if the plan's going in the wrong direction? And that's how you help ensure success. Our careers are much longer than a year. Our careers are 20, 30, 40 years. It's insane to think we can have a successful career without having a plan. And much like our plans at work, these are not set in stone. We know whatever you put down is not going to work out. But just like our project plans, having them greatly increases our chances of success.
And it's interesting because when I think career planning, my mind sort of goes to almost that like high school age, right? Because for us in Ontario, in high school, you need to know when you're picking your classes, are you doing academic or applied? And like, you need to already know, are you trying to go to university, college, right? But I know that it obviously is for everybody. And even if you are in a job, you know, career planning, what do you want to do next, right? Are you wanting to climb that corporate ladder and stuff like that? So I'm guessing the people that you work with and you speak with are of all different age categories.
Absolutely. And we can all do career planning, not just in high school and college in our 20s, but even 30s, 40s, and 50s. It might be different what you're thinking of doing. At that early stage, high school through your early 20s, you might not have a clear sense of what you want to do, and that's okay. You might even select jobs because they're going to give you more options rather than fast growth. They're going to expose you to more things or build foundational skills, whether you go this way or that way in your career. When you're in your 30s and 40s, you might be thinking more, I know what I'm doing. I've picked my industry or profession. Now I'm trying to accelerate or move up the ladder. Or maybe you're even thinking, how do I do a career pivot? Even as you get towards the end of your career, you might say, well, I'd like to reach these final few rungs, or I would like to achieve certain things before I finally retire. And that might be just accomplishments. It might be financial. Let's make sure you have that plan to achieve it and don't just cross your fingers and hope.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I kind of want to go to next is how we should create a career plan, or how we develop a career plan. And then once you kind of talked about that, I want to circle back and talk about a career pivot, because I thought that was an interesting point as well.
A career plan begins by asking ourselves a number of questions. And I map out a bunch in the book. They're also available as a free download on my website. And these are questions. Some are obvious. Okay, what do you want your job to be like? But there are also questions like, what do you want in your life? What do you want for your family? Recognizing if you want to have children at age 25, then certain careers, such as working on an oil rig, might not be conducive to that. If you want to live on the farm, but you also want to be top in the field in finance, that's going to be a challenge, because if you want to really advance in finance, you have to be in major financial hubs. So we're going to start to recognize some of these trade-offs. What impact might you want to have on your community, on the world? It's not just about our job, but there's plenty of job questions too. We want to think about our life holistically, because our job is part of that. When you think about these questions, you want to answer them not just for today, but maybe 5, 10 years down the road, if you can think about that. Not everyone can, and that's okay. For example, lots of people at age 24 might think being a consultant, being on the road, flying off to a different city every week, that's exciting. I had lots of friends who love that. When you're 44 and you have a spouse and kids at home, the idea of being on the road 4 or 5 days a week is not so enticing to some people. So recognize what might you want down the road. Again, you might not know answers down the road. You might not even know answers for today. And that's okay. But even as you start thinking about these things, it's going to help you plan. Once you start to have the answers, that's going to lay out where you're going. And then knowing where you're going, just as if you said, I'm going to drive cross country, I'm going to drive from New York to San Francisco. Well, okay, are you going a northern route? Are you going a southern route? Are there certain stops along the way that you want to take just because it'll be interesting to go see this? You plan out your route. And of course, along the way, you're going to say, oh, well, there's traffic, there's weather, things come up, I'm going to reroute. That's what we're going to do with our plan. So once we have a sense of our goal, and that goal can change along the way, we can decide, you know what, LA, not San Francisco, and that's okay, and just the route. But as you go along the way, what are those way stations? If I want to be, in my case, I want to be a CTO, a chief technology officer, I couldn't just go from software engineer to CTO. I needed to be a director of engineering and a VP and achieve certain milestones along the way. So once I had the goal, I then backtrack. What are those steps along the way and how do I achieve each of those?
Now, in terms of a career pivot, so for myself, I spent 15 years in the security industry, and then I had a unique opportunity to get into the software side of things. So I'm working for a software company now. What are some of the things when we're making a pivot like that to go into a completely different field? What are some of the things that we should consider when making that transition?
First, have your eyes open before you jump. You don't want to make a career pivot and then discover you hate this new career. So make sure you understand what you're doing, because a career pivot is costly in terms of time, energy, and money. You can either do a hard pivot, where, for example, you go back to grad school. An MBA is a classic pivot. Whatever you did before you became an MBA, you could be an artist, a teacher, a soldier, and then you come out of the MBA and suddenly you're doing finance or marketing or HR because you got the MBA. That's a hard pivot, but it's very costly, both in tuition and giving up a significant portion of your life to go study and get that degree. You can do a softer pivot where you're saying, okay, I'm in the security industry, let's say, and I want to get into software. So maybe the next job you take is at a company. Let's suppose you were a trader. Okay, well, traders don't necessarily use software, but maybe you can go to some algorithmic trading firm where you work with the software engineers and help them develop their software. Okay, now you're getting one step closer. And then you start to, as you're doing this, maybe take some classes at night or read some books and start learning how to code. Then you get even closer. Maybe you become a product manager at a company producing financial software. So now you're even closer. You may not be coding yet. And then that third step would be, now you're familiar enough with the industry, you've learned how to code, you've worked with your peers the past couple jobs, and now you move into a software developer role. So you can map out the plan where you take these steps. No one step is too big. Each is an adjacent step. I think of it like knocking over bowling pins. You hit one pin into the adjacent pin into the other, and then eventually you get that last pin.
And I'm thinking, so with that pivot, if you've been in a career for 10 years, you haven't done any interviews, or probably none, right, during this time. So what do you recommend for somebody who's going into this career pivot and then now becoming a better interviewer?
You probably have been doing some interviews, even if you've stayed in the same job and you yourself have been interviewing, you've probably interviewed other people. And that's actually some really great experience. And I hope everyone out there, when you interview other people, you step back and think, that was a really good answer. I like how this candidate approached this question, or I did not. And then you reflect on how you would answer those questions, because we can learn by watching others. You can also do mock interviews. It's kind of funny that people don't do this. If you think about it, if someone said, I need you to give a speech, very big, important speech, you say, okay, I'm going to go plan my speech, practice my speech, not memorize it word for word, but rehearse it, be comfortable with it. I'm going to videotape myself, watch myself do the speech. I'm going to have friends watch, give me feedback. Well, interviewing is almost a form of public speaking. You're not standing on stage in front of other people, but it's very similar, and yet we don't do any prep for it. So everything we do for public speaking, you can practice your answers. Guess what? You know what a lot of the questions are going to be. And even if it's a new field, we know the general questions. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about a time you failed. You can practice those questions. You can look up questions in the field you're going into. You can practice in front of a camera. You can have friends interview you. I've mock interviewed friends of mine and then given them feedback. So you can do all this to plan and prepare, and that's going to warm you up for when you actually go and do your real interview.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that I would like to ask about is networking and the importance of networking in, either carving out your career objectives, meeting the right people, or even just making that career change. Where would you rank networking in terms of its importance?
Extremely important. And now most people get networking wrong. Most people think, hey, you know what? I need a new job. Time to go network. Well, let's think of the following. Hey, you know what? I need to pack up my apartment this weekend and move. You two seem nice. We just met. Hey, can you just come over this weekend? We're going to carry my couch down a couple flights of stairs. Don't worry, I'm going to order some pizzas. Right? Are you going to come over and help that stranger you just met? No. But if we've known each other for 20 years, I said, hey, listen, I really need some help. And I say, yeah, of course, Mark, not fun, but we'll do this. It's those longer term, deeper relationships where we can ask for more. Now, someone just passing along your resume, yeah, okay, you're looking for a software job? Yeah, all right, I'll submit your resume. But saying, hey, this guy's really good. This guy should move to the top of the pile. I know his resume doesn't look like he has the experience, but I've known him for years. He's reliable. He's smart. Really, he deserves an interview. Now I'm using more of that relationship with my manager. The question is, do we have that relationship that I'm willing to put myself out for you? Just like, coming over to move someone's couch. So what we want to do is build these relationships for the future. When it's time to use your network, when you say, I need people to get me X, you're past the point of needing to network. You should have built it long ago. Now, that doesn't mean you say, oh, well, too late. Start building today, because you will need that network tomorrow. So go out, meet lots of people, different fields, build relationships. It's not just thanks for your business card, see you in 3 years when I need something. Build a relationship with these folks, and then in the future, it will be there when you need it.
And I was just thinking, I'm like, when you're doing it, almost when you're in a position not looking for a job, it's way more genuine. And I think people can get that vibe, right? Compared to when you're on the hunt, on the prowl, and you're, at a conference and stuff like that, you're just handing out all these cards. People aren't going to take you, that you're being genuine about the whole situation. So it's nice to build it up, like you said, as you go, right?
Well, absolutely. And this is one of the keys to relationship building. No one wants to meet someone who then needs something, right?
Yeah.
We build relationships often by giving first. Hi, nice to meet you. How are you doing? Tell me about you. Hey, how can I be of help to you? And if you go in with, nice to meet you, this is what I need, you feel used. So go in. I never start with, this is what I need. I always start with, nice to meet you. Tell me about you. What can I do to help you? And over time, we build that relationship. So when I do need something from you, you say, wow, Mark, I've known him for a while. He doesn't come in saying he's just using me for what I can give him. In fact, he's even helped me a couple times. You're going to be more likely to help me down the road. So network now. There's a great book by Harvey Mackey, and I love the title, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And that's how we have to think about networking.
And just one other piece on that. So I've, in talking to so many people, you hear, oh, I got this job because I knew somebody. Now, granted, that's not the only reason why they got the job, but when it comes to that networking, so you have two people, one who nobody can vouch for, has great experience, and the other who a whole bunch of people can vouch for, maybe not as close an experience, but they get the job, right? Do you see that often?
All the time. And it comes down to understanding what you're really being evaluated on for the job. We think of the job has certain requirements, X years of experience, knowledge of Y and Z. Say, well, I have more experience, more knowledge of Y and Z. But how much does that come across? Someone with 12 years of experience versus 10 years? Yeah, okay, it's more. Maybe it's not a significant difference. So I've got these two candidates. They both seem qualified. Maybe one's a little more qualified, either I can't tell, or maybe I see it, but it's just a little. But then because it came in through a network, because you said, Mark, I have known this woman for 20 years, and she is the hardest working person I've met. She is responsible. She really goes out of her way. Well, I also want that in an employee. It might not be listed in the job description, but that's really important. And so now, well, this one candidate's maybe, I don't know, a little more experienced, but you're telling me this other candidate, she is an incredibly hard worker. That is something I don't have to wonder. You're telling me, and I trust you, and you validated her. That's incredibly valuable. So my evaluation metric includes these other things that aren't listed in a job description, and it can be signaled through our networks. And that's why networking is so valuable.
Okay.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I like the way you explain that too, because you use the term that I always use, which is relationship building. And that's what I try to tell people. That's exactly what networking is. It's kind of become networking has kind of become a buzzword, and a lot of times has a kind of negative connotation to it. But if I'm to just kind of speak to my own experience, I don't even know how many jobs, but the last time I actually applied for a job blind was probably more than 15 years ago. Most of the time, someone's reached out to me because of the network that I've been able to build. There's one job in particular where I knew about the posting 7 months before the job was actually posted. So you still have to go through the process. You still have to interview, but those hiring managers in a lot of cases already knew that we want you for the position, and it was just going through the processes. So I had a huge upper hand in a lot of these cases, and it's worked against me as well. I remember there was one management job I applied for, and I did a phenomenal interview. I came in with a strategic plan. I got some good feedback on the interview, but they already knew who they wanted to hire. So by not having networked with those individuals, it may have cost me that opportunity. But again, just so much value in the whole networking piece. I had someone say to me once, I guess it's not what you know, it's who you know. And what kind of Tanya alluded to, it's a little bit of not just not just who you know, but who knows you. And the thing I actually said to that person was, well, the individual knows more than just me. So there, it's the networking, but also bringing that skill set as well.
Absolutely. And you've hit upon why networking has gotten a bad rap. And the reason for that is because so many people do it badly. You go to an event, someone says, hi, nice to meet you. Here's my business card. Let me get your card. Okay, great. Keep in touch. Next. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. Here's my card. Let me get your card. And they're just collecting cards. Or nowadays we have people just adding people on LinkedIn. Adding someone on LinkedIn and saying this person is in your network, that's like swiping right on Tinder and saying this person is now your significant other. But that's the mentality we have. Oh, look, I have all these connections. I must be super networked. And so that's a bad experience. The other thing is I get emails. Hey, Mark, I'm just trying to network with you. Can you tell me who in your company is responsible for hiring or buying this? No, you're not networking with me. You're just trying to use me to open the door to someone else. We don't have a relationship. And look, it's fine to give me a cold call and say, I'm trying to sell and I want to use you to help selling. I'm still not going to respond to it, but I at least appreciate the honesty. When you pretend this is networking, that's why networking gets such a bad name, because people misuse and abuse it.
Yeah. And I really like what you said there. It's about taking that relationship building approach. For me, I've never really went into networking with an end result in mind. It's just really about meeting people because, hey, who doesn't want to know people? Who doesn't want to know people who know interesting things, or, you can just learn from and learn from each other at the end of the day. It should be a mutually beneficial relationship. That's how, those are the best relationships that you have, I think, in life in general.
Absolutely. And here's the part that kills me. You mentioned the phrase earlier. We've often heard it's not what you know, it's who you know. I heard that since I was a kid. We all heard since we were children, networking is important. It is about getting to know people. It is who you know. And this is such an important skill. We've heard this for decades. Well, if this is so important, how come no one actually bothered to teach this to us? And what happens if you do learn to do it better? What is that going to do to your career and your success? So it's unfortunate we weren't taught earlier, but if you invest the time in getting better at and building out your network, it is going to have a terrific impact on your career.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a couple things that you hit on there, but I guess the one that I kind of want to drill down a little bit more on is the fact that it's, these are important skills that aren't taught. And I think a lot of school systems are failing us in this way, where we don't teach people things like finance, or in this case, networking. Like, these are important life skills. Why do you think these are things that we tend to overlook in the education system?
Because the education system is unfortunately backwards looking and historically designed for a different purpose. In the US, and I suspect Canada too, the high school system is a relatively modern invention that came about as we industrialized and we got people off the farms. Because when you were on the farm, you just learned from mom and dad what your role was, what you had to do. But when you need to go into the modern workforce and work in a factory, work in the city, you need certain skills, the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. And schools were needed to educate the workforce so they could go work in the factories. And they did a great job of that. And that worked for most of the 20th century. Even when we moved into office work, still it was very command and control. It's only been in the last 20 to 40 years, depending on how you define it, that we've moved into a different type of office culture where we got rid of a lot of hierarchies and middle management and moved into now these teams of different people with different backgrounds, all trying to work together on larger complex problems, as opposed to your job is to stand on the assembly line and hammer, or just to do the monthly financial report and say, here you go, sir. Okay, now I'll do next month. Now the university system goes back about 900 years. The university system was designed for a different purpose. It was designed by the researchers who were very interested in getting very knowledgeable about a subject. And if you think about your college degrees, if, for example, you studied finance in college, well, you took a whole bunch of classes. You took some intro classes, some intermediate, some advanced classes. The university might have said, take a few general math and language and history, just because we like to say we're rounding you out. Now, at the end of this, they're giving you a degree, and all that degree says is you have acquired a certain level of financial knowledge. That's it. They don't say you're actually good at finance. They don't say you're a good employee. They don't say anything other than you have acquired this knowledge. That has been a proxy for you will be a good employee in finance. And if you were just sitting there with blinders on, only doing financial calculations, that was probably true. But now that we have a more complex world, that correlation is starting to decrease. And so we're missing these other important skills. And the university system and the high school system really needs to adapt and adjust to the needs of the modern workforce.
Awesome. Now, the other thing I kind of want to talk to you about is just in terms of, once we're employed. And the reason, I'd like to get your insights on this is because this was a while back, but I actually left one job because of a ethical issue. And, I know some people who have experienced similar experiences. What are some of the common ethical challenges that we may have once we get into a position?
Great question. I have left more than one job over ethical issues. The most common I've seen, unfortunately, is sexual harassment. I see that at way too many companies. But I also see other common patterns. I do a lot of startup companies. I see misappropriation of funds, and it ranges from small things such as, well, we're not supposed to be ordering dinner unless we have a client. Hey, let's just say we have a client with us, to big things where I've seen CEOs and founders justify certain trips and even bigger expenses as related to the company and really misusing investor money. I've also seen decisions where it's clearly friendship over what's right for the company. Mm-hmm. Look, when you're making a decision, personal relationships can impact that, and there's even in some cases validity. But when the decision is clearly not right for the company, but you're choosing it because of certain relationships, you're not optimizing for your fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. Then we also see issues of larger impact and the impact that you have when it comes to maximizing shareholder value. That's a very clear objective measure. We don't have other measures. And so sometimes when we focus on that first one, we have negative externalities on our community, on our customers, on our employees, but we are told we're not responsible for that. And I think that's unfortunate. And so we can see this in cases big and small. There's also the case of just secondary impact. There was a case, for example, a company that made shoes. And they would give out, when you bought shoes from them, they would give shoes to certain developing communities. Okay, that's wonderful. And it was great for everyone in those communities, except for the cobblers who are now out of work because everyone got free shoes. Do we have any ethical obligation to those cobblers who we're displacing? You could argue, well, no, look, we're doing, from a utilitarian standpoint, on the whole, more good than harm. Sorry, they're just calling the crossfire. Or you can say, well, we should do something for these other people. We have that discussion as a society as we move, for example, to driverless cars. We're about to displace 3 million people. And of course, we as a society have always displaced people. We've displaced the milkman. We've displaced the paper boy, the travel agent, whole bunch of other professions, telephone operators. They've all been displaced, but it was happening over decades where it was an easier transition. We're likely to displace 3 million workers over a period of probably about 5 to 10 years when it happens. Oh. Do the companies creating these technologies, or we as a society, have any obligation to help these people find new jobs? That's an open question. I would say we do, but not everyone agrees with that.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, right? Because you go to these stores and, everybody has like the self-checkout now. And every once in a while I'll be in there and I'll see, and it usually is like an older couple and they're like protesting, checking themselves out, right? They will and wait until the cashier comes so they can have them check them out. And, we're happy you're here. We're happy you're still working and stuff like that. And, I get technology. I get that we're in 2021, but it is interesting when you look at it, of these people in these third world countries now don't have a job because everybody has shoes, right? You don't, over here in North America, you don't always think all those steps through. So it's interesting that way.
Yeah, the world gets complex. And I know it's hard for companies to think about those secondary steps. Hey, we're giving away shoes. Oh, we didn't think about what's the next step that's going to happen with the shoes.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I think you hit on an important point there, Tanya. It's the one thing I like to kind of talk about, and it's probably a nerdy thing to talk about, but the unintended consequences of some of our actions and some of our decisions. And I think that applies equally from a career standpoint, right? Like if you don't network properly, you can build a poor reputation for yourself. If you do the same thing by just not doing necessarily a good job or not giving your full effort. What are some of the examples that you've seen, or just maybe even just your thoughts in terms of those unintended consequences and how they can really forge our path?
Well, certainly unintended consequences in networking, as you brought up. There are people, I remember on LinkedIn, there were these open networkers. Oh, I'll connect with anyone. And yeah, if I can pass your name to someone else, what value is that person's recommendation? Because they'll just pass along anyone. I have a very specific rule that anyone in my network is someone I personally know and can vouch for. It might just be, yeah, met him a couple times, he's a nice guy. Or it might be, I've known her for 20 years and she is fantastic. So they're not all the same level, but this means when someone comes to me and I give a recommendation, there is credibility to it. And if we're not careful, it is tarnishing our reputation and it's tarnishing the value of that. Likewise, in our networks, we have to be gatekeepers for people in our networks. I have a friend who is a founder of a billion-dollar unicorn company. Lots of people want to connect to him. Oh, I want to sell him this. I don't think he wants you to sell him that. I don't think he cares. And if I just open the door to anyone for him, then he's not going to take my calls anymore. Now, I have opened the door to some people I knew who had things for him and his company where I thought this will probably be valuable. And it turned out it was, and they brought in this particular service provider. But I have to protect that relationship just as people will protect relationships with me, because then we know we have that trust. And so when networking, it's great to say, oh, I'm going to help as many people as I can, but recognize there are consequences. That relationship, the value of it goes up and down based on each interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up another really good point there too. And, in terms of networking, when you're helping people, like you mentioned, there are going to be times where you maybe don't necessarily want to give a recommendation for someone. And it's important to keep those times in mind as well, or at least just be honest in a recommendation. I know there was an individual who was hired by a past organization I worked for. And, I went to my boss and I was like, okay, I'm really shocked, number one, that you didn't ask me about this person before you hired them. Looking at their resume and knowing my experience, I worked with this person. You're going to end up firing them. And sure enough, a year later they did. But again, those are kind of just based on your example. Again, that's another example of where you want to make sure that you're being forthcoming with that information if you're sharing that information.
I've said to people who have asked for recommendations, in a few cases, I've said, I might not be the best person to ask for recommendation.
I've done the same.
And not everyone does that.
Yeah, you're only supposed to give a good reference. So it's like, maybe I'll just stay out of this one.
Yeah, I didn't want to harm this person, right? I will not lie. Like there are certain questions, if they ask, this is what I would say. You might not want that. So maybe think of someone else.
Yeah. Or if I got asked off the cuff, one of the things I would say is no comment, because, my boss got to know that no comment meant I didn't have anything nice to say.
So, Mark, can we circle back to you as an author? You have your book and then you've created an app. So can you share how that all works?
Oftentimes when we read a book, you say, oh, what a great book, really good advice. And then a month later, you forget 95% of it. The other thing is that these types of skills aren't things that are one and done. You don't say, oh, I took a 2-day leadership seminar, boom, done. Now I'm a great leader. Just like you wouldn't say, I went to a golf clinic. Well, now I'm a master golfer, done. These things take continual practice and we have to recall them. So the app uses the concept of spaced repetition. That's a well-established technique to help you remember. And it takes a lot of the content from the book. If you went through a book with a highlighter, Here's an important point. Here's a good quote. That's what's in the app. It's a free app from the Android and iPhone store. You can download it and use it one of two ways. Either you say, I'm about to walk into an interview. I'm about to go into a negotiation or a networking event. What was it Mark said? Let me open up the app and just quickly flip through those tips and get that quick refresher, because I'm sure you're not carrying the book with you. The other thing it does, you don't even have to open the app. You just set a time, and each day it's going to give you a little notification with one of those tips. Think of it like a daily affirmation, but it's taking what was in the book. And this is where the spaced repetition comes in. You go, oh, right, that was a good point. Networking is about relationship building. Yep, got to remember that. Or all these other points in the book. It's just going to help you keep it top of mind. It's going to therefore help you remember it and make it part of your daily life. So you're applying these techniques in your job and in your career. The app is completely free. So if you download the book, it is a great companion to the book. You can even say, I just want to focus only on chapter 7. Okay, just set to notifications from chapter 7. Or if you're not sure about the book, download the app, try it out completely free, and you can see if you like the advice in it.
That's perfect. I like it. And when did you come up with that?
I came up with that blinking now a year, I think even 2 years ago. Time blurs in COVID. I was chatting with my neighbor and she said, oh, you should build an app for your book. So, okay, well, what should the app do? I said, I don't know, but you should build an app. Okay, great. Yeah, I wish someone told me, and you should sell lots of books, right? I mean, there's the advice you need. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what the app should do and how to sell books. And really, what is it that was needed? I didn't even intend to build this app. I thought someone must have built this. And I was shocked when no one did. So when I realized there was a need, filed a patent on it, created it. I actually have a white label version of it coming out, hopefully later this year, so other authors can also do the same thing with their content.
Okay. That's great. I think just that practical, it's right there, literally right at your fingertips. Everybody has their phones. So just it merging together with the book, that's great.
Yeah, I think we'll see more books doing this in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing too, and I want to try to help you sell some books here. So, you don't come across as one of those gurus, and I'm, you all can't see me, but I'm doing the air quotes. One of these gurus who's like the typical snake oil salesman will say, who's promising you these results of, you do my program in 60 days, you'll be making $10,000 a month or what have you. But you do make a claim in your book that the advice we'll get is going to make you $30,000. Now that's a pretty bold statement to make. So can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, let me back that up. I appreciate that you're recognizing I'm not a snake oil salesman, because I'm an engineer at heart, and I stand by what I say, and it really needs to be data driven and proven. The advice in the book, it comes from teaching for 20 years at MIT. I teach alongside professors at Sloan and professors in the School of Engineering. There's research behind all this. But let's talk about how you can make $30,000. Imagine you're 30 years old. You have a job offer for $70,000. But instead of just saying, I'm going to take the job, you've read my book, you read the chapter on negotiation, or even a different book on negotiation, said, before I take this job, I'm going to negotiate, and I'm going to negotiate for $1,000 more. Getting just $1,000 more, that's not a massive negotiation. You don't have to be the world's best negotiator. You just have to know some basic techniques. So now you just got $1,000 more. If you do nothing else in your life, if you sit in this job the next 35 years till you retire, you've just made $35,000. 1 5-minute negotiation, $35,000. But of course, you're not going to sit in this job for the next 30, 35 years. You're going to have other jobs, get promotions, get raises, and you're probably going to learn how to negotiate for more than just $1,000. If you learn to negotiate, whether it's my book or any one of the other great negotiation books out there, you can earn tens of thousands of dollars more, even hundreds of thousands of dollars more over your career. Isn't that worth investing in reading a book and investing a few hours and taking an online class? The returns are huge. And now here's the other secret. I use negotiation as an example because we can all do the math and say, oh, I get $1,000 more, another 30, 35 years. Here's the math. The same thing is true if you get better at being a leader, at communicating, at team building, at improving your network. Now, with negotiation, it's easy to say, ooh, $1,000 more. No one's going to say, hey, you're a slightly better leader. Here's $1,000 more. But if you are standing out because you're a slightly better leader, or even more than slightly better, you're going to get promotions and opportunities and be seen and advance your career much faster. So in fact, all of these skills can generate $30,000 or more in your careers if you just invest in it. And the key thing, it's not about being the best in the world. It's not about being the world's top negotiator. It's about being just a little bit better in each of these skills, and it will give you a massive return throughout your career.
It's a great point. When you talk about just being a little bit better, I always use the analogy of Usain Bolt, because Usain Bolt, if you look at his results, what he's been able to accomplish in terms of just the recognition he receives outside of the racetrack. And if you look at his results versus the person who's next to him, the person who came in second place in all of these races, nobody remembers who they are typically, but he's finishing just a little bit ahead of them in these races. Like it's, tenth of a second. And, it's made him millions more than the person who finishes second.
Absolutely. So it's small little changes, because over time they add up, right? In the second he wins, he's not instantly making millions more, but that little change is what propels him down the road to better financial outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's just, as we're wrapping things up, to remind people that even if you are in the job that you plan to be in for until you retire at this point, always striving to, do some more courses, better yourself is always going to benefit you, right? And it doesn't matter what job you're in. And it also gives you that extra nudge and push in the morning to know that, okay, you know what, I've just done this course. Let me try to implement it into my day. And then that even changes up, if you're feeling that you're in a rut, that changes the way you do your job and, just trying something new. So I think that's something that we could all benefit from.
Great advice. Easy way to start is with the app that each morning you can set to get that one tip. But I also do very much encourage online classes. The fact that you're listening to a great podcast like this one says you're already saying, I'm willing to step up and learn and make things better for my career.
All right. Now we've gotten to this point. Obviously, everybody who's listening wants the book now. So how do we get the book? How do we learn more about you and everything that you're doing? You have that phenomenal voice. If we want to hire you to speak, can you just share with us how we do all of that?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can learn more about the book. You can see where to buy it, Amazon, local bookstores, all sorts of places. You can get in touch with me or follow me on social media. You can download the free app from the Android or iPhone store. We have it linked from the website. There's also an entire resources page where you can download those questions I mentioned earlier, a bunch of other resources I link to online. There's a bunch of other books I recommend. You can also get in touch with me to book me for a corporate event or a conference. So all of this is available on the website, thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Thank you so much for your time, Mark. Thank you for your insights and sharing with us today. We appreciate it. And hopefully everybody goes out and gets the book and, you start taking those next steps to advance your career.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.